like chat about running your own classes, because that's what that was.
Yeah, very
Um,
good.
I'm going to move on to the core in yoga because it's the hot topic well, it's just the hot topic that I chose for this week. And on the teacher training that I'm on now, I've realized that in a lot of the 200 hours, especially where I'm teaching with really lovely, very authentic, very Indian teachers, they've come and flown over from India, and
Oh, wow.
they're teaching me so much about everything. But all at the same time, it reminds me that there is definitely a bit of a split and a bit of a difference between like that traditional way of teaching and some of the older cues that come up, and all this amazing stuff that we're discovering now. And when I did my research for this core workshop, I found on here, it's on the, I've got it on my iPad here, it's on the NHS Cambridge University Hospital's website. And it says myth busting about posture, core stability, and lifting. And when I found it, I was really pleased. I'm just scrolling down to the core bit because I've been harping on for ages since. Do you know Celeste Pereira?
No,
She's a
no, I
really
don't.
cool, really out there yoga teacher who's also a physio, and she's London. She is London based,
Oh,
but she's been putting stuff out on Instagram for years. So I've done a few of her core workshops, and she was like, "Guys, stop telling people to engage their core all the time." And it didn't make that much sense because I think in whether you're looking at Pilates, the problem with moving the cues on to make them more relevant to today is in Pilates, it's in fitness, even the doctors, everyone. It takes a lot of effort for us to keep up to date with like new discoveries on how things work. And she talks a lot about how, first of all, engage your core. 5 people out of 10 will think it means that pull in. Five, the other three of them will think it means squeeze your abs, and then 2 other people will think it means just squeeze everything you can feel between the chest and the pelvic floor. So it isn't really a very inclusive or a very good cue because people don't always know what it means. And the other big point that Celeste makes, which I'm going to carry on, kind of take the torch with, is the demand that we're placing on the body during asana practice when it comes to like Tadasana or, Warrior Two, Warrior One, that the actual demand on the core, on the body, is actually quite low. We're just standing there with our arms out like this. So if I were to then say, if I was to ask you to lift an apple, like what percentage of the bicep muscle would you want to recruit for that? Probably like 5% because it's an apple. So if we think that the yoga practice, unless we're doing a headstand or a forearm stand, that can be a little different. The demand is quite low. So we don't need like gripping. The word gripping comes up a lot. And with some of the training that I've done with women's health, the mummy MOT, the pelvic health stuff, it's actually quite a big problem in the fitness, yoga, Pilates industry that we accidentally ourselves, we grip the muscles, we actually hold them for a long period of time because we've been told to engage the core, lift the Muller bandha, whatever it might be in Pilates. This can lead to fatigue and issues then later on with things like the pelvic floor, the bladder control, the stress incontinence. And that is just one little thing, which I personally think is a big thing, but not everybody will. So when it comes to the core in yoga, I've practiced this with my mum earlier because I was like, Mum, I've got the situation with the laptop not working. I need to practice sharing the screen. So I've practiced this, so I hope it works again. I'm going to share the screen and let's see if it works. It will go 3, 2, 1 and share. And then you should see just my screen. Are you seeing it sideways?
yeah, it's good. Yes, you are landscape.
Oh, I'm still landscape. Okay, because it's showing me not landscape. And then I'm going to slide to this and see if this works. Can you see the core, like the skeleton there?
Yep, it's
Great.
yes.
So what I'm going to do is just check that it's not letting me spin it. That worked earlier. Now it's not. Anyway, so this is just an anterior front view of the body, and it isn't letting me spin it. So it was earlier. But I just wanted to say lots of people have lots of opinions. I did some research. Who is saying what when it comes to what is the core? And most people agree that there are the four layers. There's the external obliques, which I was going to click and show you, but it isn't working today. That's not, never mind. Is the one you see there. We've got the rectus abdominis, the abs, which you can see there. The internal oblique, which sits underneath the external, which is there, which we can't see very well now. And then the transverse abdominis, which is that deepest layer of the abdominal wall. And it's the corset muscle. So everybody agrees on those. And I think most people agree that the diaphragm as well is like the top of the core. And most people, but not all people, agree that the pelvic floor is the bottom. And then most people, if not all people, agree that the deep and superficial back muscles also make up the core. And most people agree that the core is a collection of muscles that will create trunk or lumbar spine or lumbopelvic stability. So if we're lifting a big weight, all of these muscles will tense and it will kind of stiffen up the spine, and then you're then kind of solid through that center, and you can lift and you can kind of transmit forces through your arms because you've stiffened the core. But also the core is there for movement. So the deeper back muscles are more the muscles that stabilize the spine. The more superficial ones are more like the erector spinae muscles. They move the spine like side bend, extension. And then the rectus abdominis and the obliques, they move things forwards, like we can flex the trunk and then twist the trunk and side bend as well. So the core itself is this collection of muscles that move the spine, that move your body, they move your spine, and they stabilize your spine when needed. So at the beginning of my little Cambridge and NHS Cambridge University Hospitals myth busting thing, which is on their NHS site, it was uploaded in May last year. They say that a lot of doctors and physios and people like that for many years have always told people that there's a correlation between a weak core and back pain, and that's why everyone prescribes all these core exercises with back pain. And they also mention about how we've always thought posture is really important for general health. And actually they're myth busting both of those in this article. And they're saying that, just to repeat that again, the common assumptions are there are a group of core muscles more important than others for stabilization of the spine. Strengthening the abdominal or trunk muscles reduces back pain. Weak abdominal muscles lead to back pain, and a strong core will prevent injury. The last one is that this is a common assumption, there is a relationship between stability and back pain. And then the next sentence is quite shocking, but it's something we just need to chat really about. Are you still with me?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, good, because I'm really struggling. I've only got me, and then I've got this trunk that I can't even touch. So I'm going to have to come out.
I don't want to interrupt, just in case it cuts into what you're saying. So
no, actually, I think the quality is going really well. It's working, isn't it? I was really worried it was going to be like, "Can you hear me?" Bali Wi-Fi. The next sentence says long-term research. So they've really based this on a lot of research spanning back up until today, shows that these assumptions are actually not true. So shocking, because even I am guilty of, in the last 6 months, giving patients special core exercises to prevent or to treat their back pain. Now, I don't think this is saying that exercise in general will not prevent or treat back pain. I think it definitely does. I think it's the notion that we need to specifically tense, grip, or strengthen the core to be healthy and be right. And I think it's also that we should focus on these individual little muscles that I've just mentioned in relationship to a healthy back or a healthy core, because why else would we be cueing engage your core in the yoga class? So that's quite a bombshell, because I didn't know I didn't know I'd find that article, because I was like, I need to find something that, almost like helps me communicate this, because a lot of people are like, no, when you do a triangle pose or a warrior two, you have to get them to engage their core to protect the SI joint, to protect the back, to protect this, that, and the other. And I don't agree. And I get that opinion from my learning that I've done with other people. So that's one of the main points I was going to make today. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. With caution, of course, which I'm sure you felt as well when you first read it. You're thinking, I guess you made a good point at the beginning about the difference between a really heavy load and a light load. So in a heavy load situation, we still, if I was going to do a deadlift, which is not yoga, obviously, then is when we need to not just the core, you've got to engage the glutes and the top of the thighs and the back, and lots of things there, and your shoulders in the right place. So it's one of the things you need to do, I suppose. So yes, I'm very interested.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree with that. And when
Yeah.
one of my clients commented on my Facebook post the other day and said, "Oh, I knew when I was lifting all that weight, I shouldn't be engaging my core." And I was like, Shelley, do not follow my instructions when you're lifting weights. I'm talking to yoga teachers in the context of yoga only. And I think
Yes.
when I was working with my PT, we were doing, I don't know, 30, 35 kilo deadlifts. And it really made sense to stiffen my back a little bit. And obviously that includes the core, what we call the core, and like a little bit through the bracing through the here, through the core, through the middle. And that obviously makes sense for a lot of people. But it is a bit of a controversial topic at the moment. People are sharing a lot, like really respected people that are up to date with research are sharing a lot about the butt wink. You know, the butt wink when you're doing weightlifting, and they don't want you to they don't want to let you pelvic tilt posteriorly to tuck the tailbone. And they're kind of debunking all of that at the moment. And you know what it's like
Because
with
I was going to ask about that, because that's a big thing for me. I have quite a curvy back, and so I've always been told to tuck that tailbone to try and make it straight. So I was wondering whether that is still a good cue to say, I always say lengthen the tailbone. I'm not necessarily telling people to bring their belly button in. I'm saying in Warrior Two, because I've always been very sort of like curvy, lengthen the tailbone. Is that still a good cue then?
According to all the people that are kind of on the rooftop shouting about the research, it's not necessary. A lot of people are saying, I mean, if you're lifting weight, I think the context is important. I think
Yes.
finding neutral. I'm still gonna hang on to that one, because I've been teaching that one for a while, and I think finding
Yeah.
neutral is a way for someone to just to be really aware of their body, and to know where's the end range, where's the other end range, where is the neutral, somewhere in the middle. We know that with joint positioning, if we lift something from the middle point, so if it's 180 degrees, 180 degrees, 90, that we're strongest at that point as well. So that midpoint of a joint is the strongest point. So for me, that finding the neutral is important. But the very same article that I'm going to send you, the bit where it says about posture, it's also just debunking. Posture can be affected by many different factors, such as pain, habits, mood, energy levels, work. But pain is not directly correlated, or an unhealthy back is not directly correlated to how much lordosis, how much arch, apparently. So we're all having to really change what we know, basically. And that's the really uncomfortable thing about learning, about working with the body, because every 5 minutes, they're like, you've been telling people to do that for 10 years. Stop. You're actually hurting them. Oh, right. So I've hurt thousands of people with that, but I was taught to say it.
I know.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I've left time because it's 26 minutes past. I try to keep these to 30 minutes, by the way. I want to leave time to give people give you, and of course anyone watching, another bit of context around why engage the core or pull the belly in, or even getting them to tuck the tailbone. It will create a posterior tilt. It will make the abs contract, and maybe that person might then lift their pelvic floor, squeeze their TVA, that corset muscle. They might start engaging all of those muscles in the core. Why sometimes that can be unhelpful for a longer period of time. And I want to make sure that it's clear. There's nothing wrong with engaging your core. There's nothing wrong with doing some exercise where you go engage, release, or engage for 5 seconds and release. I think the problem in some yoga classes, and I think it's a historic, is the cue that we just get taught to say is engage your core, engage your core. And people just engage their core for a long time. And that is that we can't, if we pull in our bellies, because I know that pull your belly to your spine is quite often heard in Tadasana and mountain pose. So already you're just you're standing like this with no demand on the body, and you're already engaging and pulling in. And that makes it difficult for the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, which are super important in just maintaining general mechanics around the lumbar spine and the pelvis. It makes it very difficult for them to move. So as long as you're thinking about the mechanics of breathing, so I think what would be quite nice to do really quick is for you to put both of your hands on your abdomen for a second, and put your thumbs on the ribs here, so you can kind of get a bit of rib and a bit of belly. And then just notice that
Stand.
Yeah, we can stand. And I'm sure you'll notice that, I'm sure you already teach this, but everything's good in repetition. When we breathe in, the ribs expand, the intercostal muscles are creating that movement of the ribs. The diaphragm is like a parachute, like an umbrella. It goes down. And this is to create space for you to breathe. So because the diaphragm goes down, the belly pushes out a little bit, not a lot. I think we also sometimes overteach belly breathing. We need to make sure it's just a nice even the collarbones are allowed to move, but it's the ribs, the diaphragm, everything's naturally moving. Even when we're doing a plank, we can still feel a little bit of that movement of the diaphragm. The pelvic floor at the bottom is receiving the increase of pressure because this is a closed bag of liquid. So as the diaphragm pushes down, it squeezes down, the pelvic floor receives. And so a nice thing that also actually, I must say, Celeste Perrier again is a great teacher. She introduced the idea of external cueing, so you can give people reference points that are outside of the body. It gives them a good awareness of the body moving. So you can say, feel the waistband tightening on an inhale, and that means you can definitely guarantee that you've got some diaphragm movement. So now, if we were to do those breaths and feel that moving, and now we say, okay, everybody, Tadasana, pull your belly in, drop your tailbone down, and now the last thing you're able to do now is move the diaphragm down. You're blocking it. Unless you release that, you can actually see my trousers moving. So here's me pulling in, belly in, drop the tailbone, up, back and down with the shoulders. And now I'm trying to breathe. All I can do is breathe up here. So I'm not getting a full breath. So it's a shame because we don't need to be holding the belly in at this point. There's no 300 kilos to lift. It's just standing. So I think it's, free the belly, free the ribs in most asana. If you then release that pulling the belly in, you can see, I let myself, but I can't hold that core engaged the whole time. What also happens when we're pulling the belly, when we're pulling the core in, we're engaging, pulling the belly in, is my pelvic floor's lifting. And then, of course, if we compare it to the bicep, if I want to hold a bottle for 1 minute, no problem. 20 minutes starts to ache. Half an hour, it's just going to fail. So if we teach people to constantly hold their core in, we're actually going to create a fatigue as well around some of those muscles. They're going to fatigue, and that's going to maybe cause other issues. So that was the other point. That's the why. That's kind of like, why should we not say engage your core all the time? Because I think people shouldn't listen to just people telling them facts. They should understand like why, because that's a good reason then to say, oh, I understand now. It's good to let their core move, their belly move with their breathing. If we're in a forearm stand, headstand, you're probably going to need a bit more brace, a bit more of a squeeze. But it doesn't mean that you're pulling the belly in still. You can still get quite a nice brace without pulling the belly in. And that seems to be enough. And I practiced earlier in a plank. I was like, okay, plank, pull the belly in, relax the belly. And I actually find diaphragm breathing with the ribs super effective when I'm in a plank, even though I need to hold myself nice and straight. People tend to dip down a little bit. So that means that their pelvis is tipped forwards, their back is arching. So we can tell them to tuck the belly in. So therefore, I'm contradicting myself, tell them to pull the core in, no problem. As soon as you've said it and given them a moment to feel that tip back of the pelvis and they flatten their plank, then you can say, now feel the leggings or the shorts or the t-shirt slightly tightening as you breathe in, as you've set the position and you're allowing that diaphragm to move again.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, definitely. Yes, because
Oh,
you need
good.
to
I just
set
thought
yourself.
sugar. I was like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was also thinking about balances. You need to be able to, to find that strength in the center and in your legs, etc., etc. But then that's a really good example, the plank actually. And then if you get there and then release, yeah, because you've got to engage that core to move it, but then it doesn't need to stay engaged while you're there. I can see that. Yeah, even
That
in
was it.
standing.
That's it.
Yeah, because
That's what
so
I wanted to get
my
across.
curvy back might be uncomfortable because it's always curvy. So actually, I really enjoy lengthening the tailbone, bringing that belly button in. It feels nice. It kind of stretches it out. But then I can stay there and I don't have to have that core pulled in the whole time.
Yeah.
Very good.
Oh, that was a beautiful way to end my Saturday. It is coming up to the end. It's 7:30 in the evening. Tonight, the two Indian teachers are cooking a lovely Indian dish for me, which will be lovely. We're going to eat together.
Oh,
But
lucky
that is
you.
exactly the message that I mean, you repeating that back, me wondering if I got the message across, you just repeated back exactly what I wanted what I wanted to get across.
And we didn't plan this, did we?
No, you have not been paid for today. Engage your core is perfectly fine. Actually, I don't agree with that because I think it's too woo, it's too out there. What does it mean? You can tell people to tuck this in, tuck that in, move this in, squeeze the lower abs, wrap your ribs in. That's external obliques. You can get them to tuck belly in. That's the internal obliques, and give them more specifics. But then when you're in a pose, you can teach them how to still allow the breathing mechanisms to work. So it's not pulling in and holding in the whole time. If you hold the core in for 5 breaths, nobody will die. It's okay. But it's just, let's make this like as good as we can for people's health, people's, everything considered. And I wanted to read to finish this same article that I'm just gonna link this in the Yoga Teachers Lab.
Okay.
It says very little trunk muscle contraction is actually needed to stabilize the spine. Very little trunk muscle contraction is needed to stabilize the spine. I almost fell over when I read this. I was like, yes. Deliberate core contraction reduces spinal movement and increases spinal compression by 45%. So it's fine, but if you do it for a long period of time, it's probably not as fine at all. Number 3 out of 5. Number 3, repeated studies have found no association between trunk musculature size and low back pain. So everyone thinking that everything's about strong core, got to get strong core, strong core, strong core. Your core is basically a bunch of muscles, just like your arm muscles, that know what to do. Because if I say put your arm above your head, I don't say squeeze your shoulder muscles. I say just put your arm above your head, and your body knows what to do. So these muscles know what to do, and they know how much they need to squeeze. And then number 4, you cannot isolate the core muscles in exercise, apparently. So that means that all the other muscles, other back muscles, other leg muscles, other all sorts of muscles. We haven't even mentioned the hip flexors. Everything is involved in that area. So you can't really even isolate them. So why do we get so fixated on treating them or cueing them? And then number 5, you get a similar amount of trunk core muscle contraction in all types of exercise. So people that log in every day to their apps and they go do a 5-minute core exercise, well, apparently you get as much core exercise from all sorts of every asana, every type of exercise is going to be working those core muscles. So we don't really need to make a big fuss about engage your core. I think breaking it down and understanding the muscles involved and the movements needed to stabilize or make that person feel aware of being stable. But do we need to go on about stabilization all the time when we're just doing a warrior and a warrior 3, a warrior 2, like a tree pose? I think balance and stability is all really interesting. We probably need a whole nother talk on that one.
Yes. Yeah. And then,
So
you twist it or you come down to the floor or you move out of it. So there's all of that as well.
yeah.
We set it, but then we move out of it too. So yes, there's a
And I
lot
think
to talk about there.
and the last thing to say is the demand again. I hope that I've put that across as well. Like the demand on the body, if we're lifting 200 kilos at the gym, there's a lot more demand. We're going to need to stiffen that spine a lot. We can't afford to have 200 kilos wobble and fall over to the side. We might then get a bit of an injury. But when we're in a yoga class, even if we're in a headstand, because that is probably the highest demand, the demand is a lot lower than lifting at the gym. So we don't need that full gripping, full contraction all the time. But cueing people to contract lower abs, to find their neutral, all of that's still fine. All of that is still a good thing to do.
Okay, good.
So thank you for
Lovely.
coming. It's so nice to have. I normally do these on my own, and I don't mind that. I'm just building the
Yeah.
call and like trying to show up for them. And even if it means I just present it like a lecture. But thank you so much for coming today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for that, Vic. Brilliant.
You actually have you're like the number 1 on the leaderboard in the
I
yoga
know.
teaching lab.
I saw that. That's really funny, isn't it? But I'm finding it so useful. It's brilliant. I shall continue to engage.
I'm just going to say stop recording.